wherever you are catching this from. This is take 2 of month 6 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sew Along with Cheryl Arkeson. I am your host on this Adventure Sew Along. Happy to be guiding you through all of this fun and play. We did this yesterday, but the live did not save. Thank you, YouTube. So we're doing it again. We'll consider yesterday experimentation, and today I will actually teach you how to make this block. We are making a skull, because what's a treasure map without a little bit of a warning of the pirates and the danger that could be coming? So I have made an improv skull. I have worked to simplify the process so that there might be a touch more sewing, but there is no headaches in the sewing. That's the key point. So there's no partial seams, inset seams, nothing. Just straightforward fun with all of that. So I'm still drinking my tea. We were up late watching the last of Ted Lasso. We finally watched the season. I may have teared up a little bit, but it was good. And a busy day ahead. So thank you for joining us, for joining me. Welcome to everybody. I'm just going to jump right into it because, you know, we can have chit chat, but all you'll hear in terms of chit chat is my stress at what's going on in life outside of this. And if anyone's taken a trip, large or small, we're in the days before the trip. So things are a little, and it feels like every day I think, okay, I'm ready, I'm done. And then I find out I need to do one more thing, or a kid needs something that I thought we'd taken care of and all that. So, and you know, work, because I'm going to be taking a month off. So yeah, good times. But that's okay. I'm here with you playing, and that is the best part. So I'm happy to be doing that. So I'm going to move you over here. Hi. We'll flip the camera around. There we go. We can say hello to the ladies. There's my sketch to help plan us out. And here is, I'm just going to adjust that so you can see everything. It's not super steady, so I'm just going to pardon the futzing. There we go. So you can see what's going on. Now, I did a little bit of pre-sewing because there's some boring stuff that, you know, you don't want to see and everything. So 2 things that I did pre-sewing is I've picked out, first of all, in terms of fabrics, I've gone with black and white. The version I did yesterday was all solids. Today I went with prints, but my black is a tone on tone, so it reads like a solid. And then just this fun kind of print. Very, it's subtle, but it's enough. This is my print version, so I wanted to have print stuff on it. So these are going to be our eyes, and this is going to be the center portion. You basically want to cut kind of 3 squares roughly to go in there. They can be big. You can make this as big or as small as you want. I wouldn't go much smaller than, say, sort of 2 or 1.5 inches, because then you're proportionally, your teeth strip is going to be very small, so that it doesn't look weird. And there's a lot of seams here, so you probably don't want to go too small. So I'm at 2.5 inch-ish. They may, when I get squared up, come down to sort of 2 inches there. So that's what we've got. These are going to be the eyes. There's lots more steps. Don't worry. It doesn't just look like this. You could, but I'm giving you an easier way to do it. And then I've pre-sewn what's going to become the teeth or the mouth area. So I've just gone with 3 black strips and 4 white strips. You could do more, you could do less, you could do no teeth. You can play around with this quite a bit in there. And I've just sewn them together. I don't know, I may need more. I'm going to gauge how big this is going to be once I finish the eye part. So we're going to do the eye part first because that's going to kind of dictate the size of the whole thing, but this is just kind of boring sewing. So I've left it with all of this. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'll just set that aside, is I actually want to slice this in half now. I just sewed it together as 3 to make my life easier. One less seam to sew, but you could sew them like this, where you have black and white and black, depending on if you're using scraps. That may be the best way you could have gone. But I've just sliced it together. Now what we need to do is we need to actually add these triangles to the corners of the eye to kind of create a different eye shape. And then this is going to be a foundation for our nose in there. So we're going to do this just like we would do regular stitch and flip triangles. We're going to sew along this seam and then flip that over like that. So I'm just, even though these aren't sort of perfectly squared up, they're relatively consistent size. I don't have really odd kind of things. I'm going to just make sure I'm covering the corner of what I have. I don't have to be super precise, but I do want to, minimize fabric waste in there, right? Like, so I don't want to have that where I have all this extra bit, because that's going to shrink up this backwards, or this back block, quite a bit. So that's why I'm just kind of flipping over and testing where this is going to go to just minimize the waste on this background block. So I'm happy with that one where it is. And then we're just going to go and we're going to sew it right down that seam. And then same with the other one. I'd already tested the other one, so I'm happy with where it was. Use my little scrap of fabric to be placeholder for my threads, so I don't have to hold my threads each time. And there we've got, that's going to be that. So I want to get rid of this excess behind. I don't need that. If you don't want shadowing, you're going to kind of trim a little bit more from where there's black so that it doesn't show through in your seam allowance. I'm just trimming the black. So see, you can see I've trimmed a little bit more of the black, and that should mean that I have no worries about any of that black showing through in my pressed seam allowance. I'm going to do a little bit extra here. There we go. Again, see, just a little bit more, because when that's pressed like that, now no black is showing through. Okay, so you want to give those a press. I'm just going to use my seam roller. It's a nice small seam. Right? We're creating mirror images of these. Not the same. They need to be mirrored. So you've got to keep paying attention to that in the process. Pardon me, just grabbing a bit more tea. So now we need to add black for the nose. Now, if you're using a solid, one of the great things about a solid is that you can cut your 2 triangles, and if you need to, because the shape isn't right, flip one over. I've got a print. I can't do that. So I may need to cut another scrap. We'll see. For now, I've got this is what we're going to do. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. I have quite a bit of fabric, so I'm probably going to be okay. The thing is, from a design point of view, I have a preference for the nose being, and I'm just going to show it with the fabric here, being more this shape versus the perfect half square triangle kind of shape. So if you cut a square from this, and you cut your angles, when you cut a square, you're getting kind of that nice 45-degree angle. We're not getting that in this case. It's totally a design preference, but I prefer to have a different angle. So you can see here that this is closer to that 45-degree angle, and this is, you know, closer, what would that be? Closer to 30 degrees up here, 60 degrees down here. So it just changes the angle of that a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that one, and then I'm going to compare with my other one. I have an unthreaded machine. My machine does this a lot lately, and I don't know why. I haven't quite figured it out, but it's a quick fix, so bear with me. She really needs to go in for a tune-up, but I forgot to make an appointment to drop her off this week. So it'll have to happen at another time. So there we go. Now I can do that again. Okay. So here we are. Right, this doesn't look like much. I got lots of extra seam allowances and fabric and everything, but we're coming together. I've got the right idea for the nose. Just stitch and flipped that one again. Right, plenty of room behind there and all of that. So I'm going to press that and then trim away that excess because I don't need it. And there I have 1/2 of my nose eye. So I've done it this way so that we don't have to have kind of partial seams outlining the nose there. We're going to do 2 halves and then sew them together. Now I need to do the other side here, and I have a different angle if I use this piece. And I have a couple of options. I can take just simply another piece of black fabric, which I have lots of here, and cut another angle. I can play with this one, adjusting where it's going to go so that when it gets squared off, it's going to give me exactly what I want. If I've used a solid, I can just flip that over, right? Because solids are the same on front and back. So play around with it. Go with what feels right for you. So I could just play with this angle, right? Test that out. And I'm going to be pretty close, but I think I'm going to go ahead and just cut another one here. And those can go. So here now you can see, right? I want a triangle. This is not, say, for example, your typical, oh, you can't see that. Hold on a second. Right? Those were my scrap pieces. That's not your typical sort of flying geese shape. It's coming up at a different angle. There, we could go into the geometry, but I'm not going to bore you with math. So those are my scrap pieces. I'm just going to put them aside, and I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did over here on this. I will double check that I'm covering. Now you'll notice I am not at this point worrying about whether these are going to line up. That comes in the next step. Let's just get it sewn together. And my machine became unthreaded again. I'll take any tips. I'm guessing maybe changing the needle, but I didn't change it that long ago. But maybe I haven't been paying attention to just how much sewing I've been doing. I apologize if you can hear banging. I can hear banging. I wonder what my son is doing upstairs. There we go. Let's try this again. That worked. And just a lot of excess threads there. Okay. So now we have the other one here. I'm going to go ahead and trim off that scrap and press it. Okay. So now I have my two pieces here. I've actually made this a much larger nose than I did on the previous one, which is fine. Different shapes, right? It's improv work. It's going to show up a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is, just for this moment, I'm going to give myself a straight edge on what's going to become my center seam. And I'm going to give myself a straight edge on this one. You'll notice I'm not worrying about any of the other sides. I'm only worrying about the center, because I'm going to try to line those up so that when I sew them, they're pretty much coming to a point. If they're a little bit off, it's not going to be the end of the world. This is improv sewing, right? We know that things may not always line up, but we're going to try. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to, let's see if that will focus for me, is I'm lining up right here in the center where the points are. Now you could grab a pin and place it on that rough 1/4 inch mark, right? Eyeball that, and then open it up and double check how that lineup is for you. Because the angles are a little bit different, it may or may not line up, but do your best and then don't worry if it doesn't match perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew down that. Okay. So here's where I ended up. I don't have a perfect match, and it's going to be because the angles are slightly different. But does that read how I want it to do? Yes. So I'm absolutely happy with that. Not going to change a thing. Now, this needs a proper pressing, not just with our seam roller. And at this point, I am going to press this seam open. Those of you who know me a lot know that I don't typically do that, but there's a lot of bulk in those seams. So we don't want to have bulk in the middle there. So use a hot iron, use steam, use a pressing spray at this point. So we have there. So now you can really see that I didn't line it up. That is close enough for me. I am not going to redo it. If I were to redo it, you would be moving this piece up a little bit, but life's too short for that. But you can see now that we have our eye units and our nose. So I'm going to go ahead and square this up to the largest size that it wants to be. I could square it up even smaller. I could make my eyes much smaller if I want to, but I'm going to go ahead with what I've got here. So I'm just going to lay my ruler down on it. And it looks like I can get, it'll be 2 1/4 tall and 4 1/2 wide. Okay. 2 1/4 by 4 1/2. Just go with what it wants to be versus trying to force it to be a certain size. Just save yourself a lot of headaches. So there is what I have. Still doesn't look like too much. And there is my mouth piece there. Now, ideally, these are the same size, right? You can see that my mouth is a little bit narrower than my top piece. So I'm actually going to measure out this one and see what it wants to be. I could add more teeth, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to. So this one wants to be 3 3/4. I'm not so worried about the height at this point. I was just trying to get the size. 3 3/4. So it's a little bit smaller than what I have going on here. So I could add to the side. I could add more white, I could add more black, or I can just trim down what I have in terms of my eyes, which is how I am going to do it. So I'm going to trim more off of one side than the other. So I'm going to take a 1/2 inch off of this side, and then just a 1/4 inch off of this side. Different strokes, different ways to sort of problem solve, be creative with all of that. Okay, so now we need to assemble this as a unit, and there's a couple of steps we need to do. We need to add some white here. We need to slice this and insert a piece of black there, and then white on top and on the bottom and then on the sides. We're going to create kind of a block with this. So you can, if you want, measure out your pieces. I know this is 3 3/4. Just checking where I am on here. So I'm just going to cut kind of generously. Here's some pieces, so they're bigger than I need, but I can always trim down. And that's how I'll do it. I'll just cut them bigger than I need and then trim them down, because then I don't have to worry about everything matching up and being, see, it's bigger. Then it can just, I can make it work as opposed to forcing it to work. So that is the first one. Right, got the mouth. I want to press up towards the eyes or open. You don't want to press down, because pressing direction helps define the design. And if I press down, it's not defining those eyes and nose very well. So I'm going to go ahead and with a very hot iron with steam, press up. So take your time. No need to rush. Okay, well, obviously this is very large, so I don't need that much. So I'm going to aim for it to be about a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut 3/4 from my seam line. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew my teeth on. Now I haven't split that row of teeth apart. You can do it before this, but I'm just, being careful. Now I'm making sure I'm lining up kind of these edges because I had trimmed those to the same size. This is definitely a block with a lot of stops and starts in it. So there we go. So you can kind of see that. Again, I want to press towards the teeth, not up. Although I don't think it really matters here, now that I think about it. Yeah, I don't think it really matters here. So go with whichever way is going to be easier, which is going to be, in this case, pressing up. All right. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slice through here. I'm going to give that top jaw a little bit more. And then I'm going to insert a black strip because that's the center of the mouth. So I've cut one longer, but it's not the right width. So I've just cut a 1-inch strip. You don't have to measure it. You could just eyeball that. And I'm going to sew this one, and then I'm going to sew the bottom of the teeth back on. Now this is your skull. You could not have teeth. You could only have teeth on the top. You could, make them gnarly teeth, have all sorts of different things. Actually, I'm going to press this and just show you how we can play with that bottom jawline, I guess we'll call it. The bottom of the jaw. Right? If you have a long strip of this, you can kind of shift where it goes. Maybe they were missing more of a tooth. It doesn't have to line up. And I'm not going to get fussed about this lining up perfectly as I sew it. I'm just going to kind of eyeball where it needs to be, flip it over, and then go to the machine and sew that. Just be careful when you're sewing with all those teeth parts there that you don't flip any seam allowances, right? Because that's gonna make, right? We want to keep the back nice and neat here. And I'm pressing towards that center back section, or middle back section, I should say. Okay. So that's kind of the center basis of our skull. Still doesn't look so super skull-like. So we're going to add pieces on the side and then pieces on the top. So let me give my block a little bit of a straightening on the sides, and I'm probably going to trim those teeth just a little bit because I think the bottom ones are a bit too big. So I'm going to cut off a little bit there. And now I'm going to put around the outside. You do not have to measure what they're going to be because we are going to be trimming off around the outside, so they don't have to be sort of a specific size. And in fact, giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room is probably better than having it too small. So we'll just quickly add those. And then we will add the top and bottom. Same way, giving ourselves just excess to play with. It doesn't define exactly what size it's going to be by what you do and how big those are. Do you need to add like 6 inches on each side? Probably not. But I wouldn't fuss about whether it's 2.5 or 2 3/4 or whatever. Just cut some strips. If you're working with scraps, use what you got, right? So now we have that. I'm going to give these a good press. Again, I want to press towards the center so that those features really kind of get defined. And then we'll repeat with top and bottom. I find that this block, if you press really well as you go with a really hot iron, I love steam, it's gonna stay nice and flat for you. Take the time to do that step there. So you're seeing it a little bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and I don't know if this piece will be big enough, but we'll see. Oh, look at that. It is. Just get that rid of that fold in there. In the bottom of it. If it's not straight, don't worry. Just lay them right sides together and give yourself a nice fresh cut. And then you have both of those being nice straight seams. And then we do the same thing on the bottom. Looks like I'll have to cut another piece, but that's okay. I have lots of this white fabric. Okay. There we go. I think I'll just cut from the bottom here. All right. I'm just gonna eyeball a piece like that, and then I will lay them again on top of each other. I'm done with my white, so I can get rid of that. Those are just scraps that will get used somewhere else. Lay them on top and give myself a nice fresh cut. So it's nice and straight, and I'm going to sew that together. And watch those seam allowances again. Alrighty. So you can see, looks very much like a skull now. As soon as you put that framing around it, it really changes things up. So again, pressing towards the center, use that hot iron, use the steam. You can use your pressing spray, which I love, this Flatter product. Any of those will work. Take your time pressing so that everything's going the direction you want it to be. You can press from the front and the back. I gotta say, this is one of the neatest backs I think I've ever done. We all have flipped seam allowances and stuff every now and then. Okay. Look at that. Now, I could simply square this up and it would work as a skull, right? We get the idea of the skull shape, but I like to add the framing of the black around it because that kind of helps define it a little bit more. So what are the ways that we can do that? We can do it kind of a couple of ways. I'm just seeing what I've got in terms of my scraps. I'm going to cut a bigger piece, but that's okay. I have that fabric on the bolt because it's my own fabric. So I'm just going to cut a chunk off of this, which will be way more than I need, but I just don't want to have the bolt up there for us. So there we go. This is the reason I chose my own fabric, and I don't have to worry about it. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. We can, both of them, I'm going to use what I call the layered angle or layered curve technique. This is where we're going to lay our fabrics right sides up, and we're going to cut both of them at the same time, because then they kind of mirror each other and what they're going on. So I'm just kind of wondering if I can do it all as one, but then it's going to be harder. I will admit this. If you do it all as one, it doesn't necessarily want to lay as flat. So I'm going to do this in sections. I'm going to do a curve up here and then an angle at the top. That's what I did yesterday, and I kind of like it. So just from a visual perspective, trim off these extra little bits. It'll help us there. So let's go with the top first. So I can do these, right? And I just want to I can even do this as a curve, or I can do it as an angle. I'm going to do it as a little bit of a curve. See, freehand cut that. You can see kind of that curve going on. Now, I always like to have my concave on the bottom, so I'm flipping over the top, and I'm going to go into the machine with it looking like this. Let's move you over to the machine a little bit so you can see better. And I'm under the needle. And when you're sewing these improv curves, you're only going to worry about an inch at the time. You can see things don't line up. I haven't pinned. I haven't done anything. These don't line up. Don't worry. They will. I'm only going to worry about kind of what's in front of the needle and just guide things. I want to do that without stretching or pulling. But you'll be amazed that with these sort of gradual curves, how easily they want to line up for you. See? Got that one corner. Okay, now this time I'm actually going to press so that my skull is popping off the black. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then the bottoms as well. Define the jaw area. So I have my curve there. You can see I'm layering it so that I have a bit extra around the side, just so that gives me some wiggle room. I'm going to rotate that. a little bit. There we go. I'm going to layer them right sides up and then just do a nice gradual cut. Flip that over so that I have, again, my convex on the bottom. Now, when you do this technique, your seams don't line up, or your seam allowances aren't included. So it means they're not going to perfectly line up. That's why we cut extra, right? We make it a little bit bigger than it needs to be, because then we can trim down, square it up in a way that works. Okay. So there is the second one that gives us the top of our head. And then we just have to repeat for the bottom, except on the jaw part, I'm going to cut in on the sides a little bit, I think. So let's get rid of extra stuff there. You can see where we're at. I'm going to layer, give that nice. You want to start with flat pieces, because then you don't have to worry about kind of bubbles and bumps along the way. Okay. So again, we're going to layer right sides up. Now I'm going to move this over because I want my jawbone to kind of come more to that, let's pull you away, more to that narrow point. If I cut here, I'm really only kind of dealing with that corner here. I kind of want to really come in a little bit more there. I have a lot more fabric than I need. I'm just going to leave that for now. In fact, I don't need this top portion, so I'm going to use the shorter one just to show you. I want width, but I don't necessarily need height. So put that one aside for the moment. Right? This is the part that I'm sewing. I don't need to sew up here because I already did that. Like I said before, you could do that as a single piece. I just find it harder to make the block lie flat, and I really want this block to lie flat. So I'm not taking my chances on that. I'm just going to move you over here so that I can do this cut. Again, we are right sides up, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to kind of eyeball a cut there, and I have all this excess, and that'll be fine. There we go. So you can see when I've removed, I've given myself this cut. Do I have more fabric than I need here? Yes, but I can cut that off afterwards. I would much rather cut it off afterwards than be worried about not having enough. I know a lot of people worry about the scraps from improv. I do not, because I love scraps, and they can just be a new opportunity for something later. No such thing as wasted fabric. Wasted time might frustrate you, but definitely don't have to worry about wasted fabric. It will get used. So there is that side. I'm going to give that a press, and then we're going to do that final seam on the other side. Flipped it a little bit, so just bear with me. It's taking a bit longer. A good pressing can really kind of correct some faults. So now I'm going to do the other side. Again, I have more than I need, so I'm just going to trim that off. Right, and I want to do that curve as well. I don't want it to come to a point, so I'm kind of offsetting just a little bit. And I'm going to do my best to kind of mimic this curve, but I'm not going to get too fussed about whether it's exactly the same. Right, I've got that. So let's sew this final seam and then talk about finishing up the block. It's such a gradual curve that there's really no trouble doing it. Right. Okay. I'm going to give that a final press and then show you the block and talk about how we can finish this up. Oh, I quite like this one. I think Prince was a good call. And I like that white print that I chose. So there is our skull. Now, what will define it further is if we have black all the way around the block. So you can add a black piece on the top. We can add on the bottom, all that. But I'm just going to trim this up so that it is a block shape on which to add the black. I'm not going to add the black because you don't need to see me sewing that. But we'll see there. Now I'm debating whether I'm actually going to kind of straighten off these sides a little bit, make it a bit narrower. I think I am. So you're going to see that it's going to change things just a little bit. I'm going to go with 7 inches wide and 8.5 inches tall, just because that's what it wants to be. But you can play around with what this becomes for you. Oops, at 8.5 I said, and 7 wide. So I'm putting 8.5 here, 7 there. It doesn't have to be super specific. But you can see I am trimming off quite a bit. But if I had tried to do, you know, this really small sewing, the block would move a lot more and shift a lot more and not quite stay as small. So there we have that. Now what you can do is, I'm just gonna grab some scraps here, right? Frame it all up in black. And then the skull really, really pops, right? Get another strip. Right, once you frame it up in black, the skull really kind of pops off, or whatever color. Maybe you didn't use black on the background. I kind of went with the conventional sort of Jolly Roger colors and did that. So we've got that there. So that is our skull block. Pretty straightforward in there. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I think it's going to make a great addition to the quilt. Here is the original one that I did, right? You can see each one's going to be unique. This one is wider here than this one. This one's taller, right? But everybody's head is unique and different. So it's going to work out just fine no matter what you do in there. So I'm going to get ready to sign off here. I still need to make my abstract version over here. I'm not quite sure what I'll do with that, but I have a couple of ideas, but I'll play with that before we meet again. Now, just a reminder, we are not meeting next month. We will meet again in September for the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong. I am going to be away on that big trip that I mentioned. So I don't want to commit to next month because I'm not going to be near a sewing machine. And it's summer. Everyone should take time off to play in the real world, right? Go to the water parks, go to the splash parks, go to the lakes, do all that fun stuff out and about with your family if you can, or with your friends, and just enjoy the summer. And if you're just new to all of this, I'm going to put that skull there. If you're just new to the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong, you can join at any time. All the videos are free. Here on YouTube, we have the 2023 version, which is our treasure map inspired version. If you go to my Instagram, which is at Cheryl_Arkeson, you can find all the videos for last year's, which was 52 free video tutorials for different improv blocks. I'm happy to provide all of this content for you. Love seeing people experiment and play. So this is fun for me as well. This is playing too. I'm excited to see how these end up. You don't know. That's the joy of improv. We're starting without knowing where we're going to end up. It's the meaning of life in a way. And having fun along the way. So thank you, everybody. Have a great summer, and we will see you back here the first Tuesday in September. Take care.